Before we start this week's episode, a word from our sponsor, MFG.com.
Are you an engineer or designer looking for reliable and skilled manufacturers to bring your designs to life? MFG.com, the world's largest online manufacturing marketplace, connects you with over 10,000 suppliers across the globe. Browse the directory or submit a request for quote and receive an average of 4 quotes from U.S. suppliers. MFG provides access to a wide range of manufacturing capabilities, including precision machining, injection molding, and 3D printing, so you can find the right supplier for your specific project needs. Signing up for MFG.com is quick and free and gives you the ability to manufacture your engineering designs efficiently and effectively. So why wait? Sign up for MFG.com today and take your engineering and design projects to the next level. Again, visit MFG.com to sign up today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Engineering Entrepreneur Podcast. This is episode 135, and my guest this week is Jim James. Before we get started, go to my website, CADdesignhelp.com, and sign up on the email list. And as a thank you, we will send you a PDF of the top 4 mistakes inventors make, and you'll be updated on all the news. I'm actually working on a separate website for the podcast per Jim's advice, but it's going to take me a few weeks to get that done. So in the meantime, just go to CADdesignhelp.com. Please leave me a review on iTunes. It'll help grow the show. And finally, if you have any questions, reach out to me at info@CADdesignhelp.com. So with that, I'll introduce our guest this week, Jim James. And Jim is an entrepreneur. He's a host of the Unnoticed Entrepreneur Podcast, and he's worked over 30 years in PR as well. So Jim, thanks for coming on, and I'll let you take over from here.
Well, thank you, Scott. Yeah, and congratulations on hosting an amazing show. You've got a lot of episodes in there and adding a lot of value, I know. And delighted that you're building up a website because your show really deserves that. And, I thought what we could share today amongst your community are really a few key pointers for anybody that really wants to get their business noticed. So I would love to talk to you about what I call the holy trinity of public relations. So if you're okay, I thought we could maybe talk a little bit about an approach to PR to increase sales. And I think that's of interest to everybody right now.
Yeah, sounds good. And is that kind of what your podcast focuses on as well?
Yeah, so the Unnoticed Entrepreneur Podcast is really about how to get noticed for business. So I interview entrepreneurs around the world, and they explain for their different kinds of businesses what tools and tactics they use to get brand visibility to generate sales leads.
Got it.
And as you said, Scott, I've had over 30 years, aging myself a little bit here. I went to Singapore in 1995 to start a PR firm called East West Public Relations. And then in 2006, I went to China, to Beijing, to start the offices there. And whilst in China, I started a few other businesses, including importing British sports cars to China. And I was the interim CEO for Lotus Cars. So maybe some of your listeners will be familiar with those brands. I'm sure they will. And then I came back to the UK in 2019 and sold the PR business, and have been focusing on this unnoticed entrepreneurs. I have the podcast, I have a book, and I run masterminds, really all dedicated to helping those entrepreneurs that are building a brand to get noticed without incurring the expense of going to an agency. So that's really what I'm here for.
All right, great. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. So Scott, I helped big companies, big B2B tech companies get noticed by getting them into the media, building websites, using mobile and so on. And now with the technology that we've got at hand, I can share this information with your audience here from the UK at no cost at all. So what I'd love to do is just talk a little bit about this idea of the holy trinity of PR and this approach to increasing sales. So the first thing, just as a stat for those of you out there, is 61% of companies have said that generating leads is their biggest marketing challenge. Okay, this is a a survey by HubSpot, and really showing that generating leads for most companies, and that's fresh leads, because often we've got recurring clients, but it's growing the business requires often fresh leads. Now the next,
and I would say it needs to be qualified leads. Like I get a lot of leads that just are people that have no budget, right? So it's not really a qualified lead because there's no chance they have the budget to do a project.
Yeah, and in economics there's this term of effective demand, right? People can actually want and afford, as opposed to ineffective demand, which are people that's going to maybe take your time, but you still need to keep warm for later on. The next statistic that I just love to throw out is that 91%, excuse me, 91% is the number of companies and the people running them that are looking for authenticity as the most essential characteristic in a vendor. So authenticity is the number one characteristic that people are looking for in a vendor. Now, that may sound surprising. I know with your CAD Design Help business, you're helping people to create innovative products with 3D printing, maybe, for example, and prototyping. And there's often a focus on creating a product that's innovative, for example, or offers the best value, or maybe has the best branding, for example, because this is often, in traditional terms, what we think of as being marketing. But at this Credibility Institute report shows that actually authenticity is the number one quality that we need to look for. And what's really important about this is that in the last couple of years, the importance of authenticity has grown. And we know this because you do a little bit of a search on, it's called the Google Books Ngram View. It actually shows the number of times that a word is used in a book, okay? And what it shows is that the word authentic has been used on an increasing number of titles and book titles over the last 3 to 5 years. And that's because trust has gone out of the system, really, Scott. Especially in America, we're seeing, some of the politics that you've got over there, the divisions, the undermining, the questions of everything, including, elections and democracy itself. And we've got a lot of bad actors out there that have, in corporate world as well, undermined people's trust. So the flip side of authenticity is that we need to build trust in what we do. Now, in the old days, when I started my PR firm back in the mid-90s, which is going back, sort of pre-internet, Scott, people went to the media because they trusted the media. They thought that if an editor or a journalist has interviewed somebody, there was a filter, there was some kind of credibility check there. Now, today, 67% of people believe that they're being lied to by the media. So it's not even.
I would totally agree with that. It seems like talk about fake news all the time. It's been shown that that's actually happening. Like people will go do checks on what someone reports, and it's like, yeah, this isn't true, but it takes a lot of work to actually figure that out.
Yeah, and God bless Donald Trump or not, he's introduced this concept of fake news, and we have to live with that now. But the impact of that is that in the old days, you would get your company or yourself into the local media, and that gave credibility. So you solved the authenticity and the trust issue. But now people don't read what they want to see in the media. And I've got younger children, 10 and 12 and 14, and they don't even read mainstream media. They get all their news from influencers. So that channel has gone. So what we have to do now as entrepreneurs is we have to think about why people buy from us. And as the Simon Sinek, often quoted, is that people are buying why you do what you do. So they're not just buying what you do, they buy why you do it, because the why is if you like where your authentic place comes from. And that's how you're going to be able to prove to the outside world that you're doing something that's in alignment with your core values. So the reason I'm mentioning this and hopefully not laboring it too much, Scott, is that PR has changed. It used to be about features and benefits. It used to be about, being the cheapest or the fastest or the most colorful. But now it's changing into why this product is being offered, who is the person that's offering it, and how much can the consumer, business or individual customer rely on that company to deliver what they're saying they're going to deliver. And especially when so many of us are delivering goods and services where we don't even see the customer anymore. Maybe it's something you're selling on Amazon or through Etsy, or you're delivering it as a web service. You don't even have that touch point, that human touch point anymore. So the ability to tell your story becomes a key skill. And, the joy of this, Scott, is that everyone that you work with, everyone listening to this show has a story, right? You don't have to make this stuff up. So you don't even need an agency anymore to tell you what you should look like or should sound like. It's your story. And so one of the key takeaways, Scott, I'm hoping to share today is that having your own story and believing in your own story and having confidence in it is the essential building block to building a great brand. I'll take a break there. How are we doing so far? Is that raising any questions?
No, it all makes sense. I completely agree with what you're talking about.
Okay, great. Then I'll crack on. So, Scott, what we can do in terms of sharing our story and making sure that we seem, to be authentic, I've got a few things that you can do. One is to demonstrate the personal touch and to demonstrate empathy. And we're seeing some people, going on to TikTok, for example, going on to LinkedIn, going on to Facebook and showing themselves, being there maybe with their family or with their friends or with their animals. So this idea of creating a human face, we saw this at the top level. We see Elon Musk, for example, taking a kitchen sink into the Twitter offices. I mean, you can argue whether you like that or not, but, Elon Musk has done a great job, as Richard Branson has done, as Steve Jobs did, of being a direct connection between the owner and the founder of the business and the brand and what you buy. So being there, being present is a key part of that. The next thing is about making sure that your practices are aligned with the core values. So if you have a company that says you are, for example, concerned about sustainability, which of course for especially, younger generation customers, if anyone's selling to Gen Z, the impact on the environment or views on LGBTQ and so on really make a difference to whether they buy from you. So making sure that the practices that you have align with the core values. I mean, I'll give you an example. I go to a supermarket here called Sainsbury's, and on their website and on the store branding, it says, a sustainability store. We care about the environment. When you go to the store, trying to recycle the packaging that you buy from Sainsbury's is nigh on impossible, Scott. They've got a small little bin with a tiny little letterbox hole that you can't get anything through. So there's this real disparity between what they say they believe in and what they do. Interestingly enough, the other day I went to find the store manager, and he was occupied by a mother with her 8-year-old son. They had bags full of goods that they wanted to recycle, the packaging. And she was saying, how can I say to my son that you are environmentally friendly and you're aligned with the values that you put on your website if when I get to the store, it's not true? So demonstrating your values, it seems an obvious thing to say, Scott, but it's amazing even big brands are not doing that. Another thing is about being consistent on the messaging. Now, what's important here is that consistent messaging means that you're consistent over time, but also over platforms. So consistent over time means that we have, the same message day in, day out, value, for example, or quality, and we don't deviate from that. But the other is about choosing different platforms. Now, people might have multiple platforms. They might have Facebook, they might have Twitter, they might have Instagram, they might have Pinterest, they might have TikTok. They might have their website, they have their blog. Now, the challenge is if you have all these different platforms, how do you make sure that the content keeps up on all of the platforms? The way to do that, first of all, is to decide which is going to be your key platform, one or two, rather than trying to be on all platforms, and decide not to try and be everywhere, but to be somewhere in a focused way. The next is you can use tools like, for example, HubSpot I've mentioned already, or Buffer, or Zoho is a very cost-effective alternative, where you post the same content across multiple channels in different formats. Okay, so consistency is really key. Another one is about engaging in the community that you work with. So taking part in wherever you are, whether it's you're engaging with a school or a farm or a community organization, because authenticity is showing up as a human being and being there in local context, or it could be a global community, but that is quite niche. For example, there are some sustainability groups that are global on LinkedIn, and they're very niche, but you could turn up to the events or turn up to the webinars. And the final one is about soliciting and acting on customer feedback, Scott. So, we're all guilty of being so busy building a business, making things, selling things, getting the cash in, trying to find another customer, that we often don't ask the simple question, which is, how did I do? How do we do? And getting customer feedback can be done through obviously tools like Trustpilot, for example, or FIFO, are the online ones if you're doing businesses at scale. But you can also use feedback forms from companies like Typo, for example. Typeform. There's another one called Video Ask, which is actually from Typeform as well, where you can actually make a video message saying, hi, how do we do? Record a message for me and send it back. You can do that from your phone. You can use other ones like Bonjoro as well. Getting feedback and then demonstrating you've acted on it is another form of demonstrating authenticity. So you can see, Scott, all of these things are free to do. They are really just extensions of how we would behave as a human being. I'll take a breather there. How's that?
That makes sense. I think a lot of people maybe would just assume that the customer would give them feedback, but maybe, you probably have to ask for it, because they may not just do it without you prompting them.
That's right, Scott. And actually, most people don't ask for feedback because they're a little bit afraid of what the result might be, right? So asking people, then you can either then publish that or not publishing it. But getting a feedback loop is really key. Now, there's also the whole issue here, Scott, which is that brand memory retention loss in the first 24 hours is an astounding 80%. In other words, people that hear of your company today will have, 80% of those will have forgotten about it tomorrow. Okay. So we have to continue. I mentioned about consistency. We have to continue to share what we're doing on a very frequent and consistent basis, because actually it's 80% will be lost in 24 hours. And then actually within the first hour of exposure to a brand, 50% memory loss takes place. In other words, you've forgotten half of what you saw even an hour ago. I sometimes think as I get older, it's even more than that. But the point is that we're so bombarded, Scott, with so many pieces of information.
Right.
Today.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, it's just, if you're on Instagram scrolling through, I mean, you're seeing a million different things, and everyone's attention span is so short that you're going to forget. And like, I guess if you're going to do like paid ads, you're going to have to just do so many of them for so long to make an impact, because you're going to have to show up in someone's feed constantly for like weeks to actually really remember who they are.
Yeah. So
which is going to cost you.
It is, which is why consistency is really the solution. Whichever channel you choose to use, direct mail, signage in your store, sending people an SMS. Consistency is the key. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of cadence. Okay, so how often you might want to think about. Now, I break down audiences into three, Scott, into customers, employees, and partners or shareholders. Okay, so the received wisdom for talking to customers is just 3 times per week. Okay, so the source of this is HubSpot. I'm saying this because I want listeners to have a sense of how much is enough. So 3 times a week, if you can talk to your customers through, for example, email, is fine. For employees, once every 2 weeks in a formal way, as opposed to just an email or a text, having some kind of bi-weekly messaging. And there are tools. There's one called Mo.work, for example, which enables you to have like an online community for your staff, as opposed to Slack and so on, which is really sort of a work-focused, tool-based system. And then for partners, once a month. So if you know as well as I do, Scott, especially in B2B, that a lot of clients are referrals from partners, right? I'm sure you have this with your design help. Someone has been a customer or a partner of yours, maybe they're a supplier of yours, and they'll tell someone else about you, and they need to keep up to date with what you're doing. So often partners are overlooked as a source of leads, and yet they really need to be, for example, like have a lead, like a partner referral program, for example. Share with them if you've got a new piece of equipment or if you've done a new prototype that they might be interested in. Keep them in the loop once a month. So if you've got a cadence, the idea is that you maybe have 3 times a week for your customers, once every 2 weeks for your employees, and once a month for your shareholders. I hope that's useful, because then it might liberate people from thinking they've got to be online all the time, because really you don't. In fact, it becomes a distraction to your business.
That's interesting. I've always heard, like, for example, I started using TikTok like 2 months ago, and there's a local entrepreneur, David, who runs this turkey collar company. And he's like, you need to post 3 times a day, every day. I'm like, that's almost impossible. Like, I could do it, yes, but that is so distracting and just so difficult to achieve. Like, I couldn't do it. I've been pretty good at once a day. I've definitely had a week where I missed every day, and then I had another week where I posted you know what I mean? But like, on average, I've probably been doing 3 to 4 times a week for the last 2 months.
And I think there's one of my guests, Dinah Kalkovich, who came on the Unnoticed Entrepreneur show, and she was saying, we want to build authority and influence, not followers, right? And the problem is, if you are creating a lot of content, the quality of that content may go down, but you may get lots of people following. But actually what we're really looking to do is to get people into a funnel to our business, right? And if you keep producing content, they may or may not come to you. What you want to do is create quality content that gets people to want to know more about you. So I recently did a 12-week session of lives with a chap in South Africa. We called it the LinkedIn Safari. Simon Chapazo helped me work on my LinkedIn profile. And I went from posting 4 times a day on my LinkedIn to 3 times a week. And I increased engagement by 42%.
So obviously your posts, the type of posts or what you're writing or videos you're doing are different, I'm assuming. So what is the difference? Because you're talking about quality, and I mean, obviously that's a very subjective thing. So what do you define as high quality?
Yeah, so it is subjective, but there's also some objective criteria, Scott. So one is your content has to either inform, educate, or inspire. Okay, or
not just entertain. That's what most people do. They're just like throwing something out there that's funny or whatever, but it's not like no one's like learning anything by watching it. They're not.
Well, yeah, I think Scott. Yeah, I think the thing is that we all know someone that we like and think is funny, but that doesn't mean we ask them to do business with us or to sell something to us. Right. So it's about the objective, right? So as a business, you're hoping to inform someone that you can solve their problem, right? You're hoping maybe to inspire them to take action and to understand what could be better in their lives by working with you. Now, the entertain is if you like, then the way that you might deliver that content, because I interviewed an entrepreneur in Los Angeles last week who has what they call the rock star of fractional CFO businesses, right? So they're sending out content about how you can improve your tax position, for example, cash flow, right? They're informing people, but they're making it in a way that's very relaxed and very sort of rock and roll and West Coast. Okay. But the point here is that you don't get caught up in this idea that you have to do too much, too frequent. I'm going to come on to something that I've developed called the Active Communications Index, Scott, that may also help people a little bit. So just to reassure you that there are many people who are kind of, in my view, panicking by posting too much rather than focusing on the quality of what they're focusing. I spend 10% of the time that I used to spend on my LinkedIn, and I've increased my followers and I've increased the engagement on my posts.
So it's by making posts that are, I'm assuming, like what, more informative or more inspiring. Those three categories you listed, right?
Yes, and the key one here is, Scott, to not make it promotional. Okay, so what most people do is they come on and go, "Hi, let me tell you about myself. Let me tell you about what I do. Click here below for more information." Now, most people are not necessarily looking to buy, especially in social media, right? They're not looking to buy something. They go to Google to go and buy things. They're looking for a solution. But by and large, people are looking at social media with a different objective. So it's the attempt and the desire to make everything a sales piece that drops your engagement off, because people just feel like, oh, every time I hear this guy, he just wants to tell me about himself or herself, right? And that's a turn off socially too, Scott. If someone just talks about themselves the minute they meet you, you're not that interested.
Yeah.
Right?
So let me ask you an example here. I guess get my brain, it gets me thinking. So like a lot of the posts I'll do, I guess it doesn't meet any. It's really just entertaining. Like for example, the other day I was showing my Led Zeppelin object, and I put a Led Zeppelin song to it. It was 10 seconds long, and it was just showing off a 3D print. I didn't really talk about anything. I was just showing it, and it looks cool, and a lot of people liked it. It would be better in my mind, based on what I talk with you, is to show how I made it, or
Bingo.
Maybe talk about. I actually have to do some dialogue. In other words, like I need to teach them something. What you said, it was the three things. It was informative, inspirational. What was the other one?
And education.
Which is like informative. It's kind of the same thing.
Inform, inspire, and educate. Well, inform can be to give people information, right? And educate is to teach somebody something. So it's going to be so. Right. And inform is, did you know this? Right. So, for example, I put a post on today about LinkedIn as a new live audio. Right. So I've informed people that there's this new app in LinkedIn that helps you to host, if you like, a clubhouse on LinkedIn. Right. So I've informed somebody. Educate. Okay.
So you basically just, You basically made this post to just let people know what it is and how it works.
Yeah.
And you just leave your name at the bottom. Like you don't say, "Hey, book an appointment with me for a sales call," or whatever. You just kind of leave it.
Yes, because the whole point is trying to get authority, right? So in fact, in this case, I say, here's this tool, right? But now another post I did, for example, I did a summary of the things that I learned by working on my 12-week LinkedIn safari, right? I did a PowerPoint presentation, which I uploaded to LinkedIn, and it was okay. Don't join a leaderless tribe. I wrote down about the DNA of LinkedIn, for example. I wrote down what are the highest performing content formats, right? That's education. I'm giving people my guidance on what I've learned. Okay. So yeah, it's a little bit close, but going back to your point there, Scott, if you'd shown people, this is what I had before, this is the problem I was going to solve, this is how I did it, this is what I got as a result, right? then that's compelling. And what you'll see if you look at YouTube videos, the ones that do well are like where people make things, right? Let me show you how I've done this. Okay.
Yeah. I got this online course I made that I've had a few sales, but not many, but the whole point of the course is talking about how I left my corporate engineering job and started my own business. I need to make more short videos, like giving examples of that to basically get them, to build that trust score, to get them into the funnel, as you say, because while I have the course, like people aren't going to just buy right away. They need to see this other stuff. And I'm thinking this is what I needed to work on to build the sales of this course.
Yes, exactly. So, if you're positioning yourself, Scott, as an authority, right, then, like a teacher at school, the teacher doesn't say, and if you like my class, come for tutoring, right? That's when you have someone who's a tutor, and you go to them because you go, I really loved what you shared today. I'd like to have some more with you. Okay. So this idea of sharing your experiences, sharing valued insights that others can use is where you can get the value. And this builds back into this idea of authenticity. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So so what happens is that if you think more about it, actually you can spend time on building the content, but you can see how you're making less content, but it's higher value content.
Yeah. You might spend the total same amount of time in the content creation process, but it's more efficient because you're spending more time on the content you're making, but that's giving you better results than spending less time on a bunch of it. At the end of the day, it's all about results. So whatever the method is, like you've done the research, you've got.
Yeah, and if you think about it this way,
method, less quantity, more quality. Yeah.
And if you think about it this way, Scott, it's a bit like having 1,000 conversations where you just say hi to people, and having a few quality conversations with people where you really get to know and to trust and to serve properly, right? So this idea of building content that adds value rather than building high volume content was one of the key learnings that I had when I did my LinkedIn Safari. Now, when moving on, the time that you need to do a lot of communication is in a time of crisis. So if we look at, for example, Ukraine, I'm not sure how much you're seeing in America now, but, President Zelensky has done a daily nightly address. He's done a nightly address ever since the war started last February. So if you're in a time of crisis, and you'll see this from, if there's for example, a shooting or something, there is like almost real-time communication. So the cadence of your communication can change according to the circumstance. So moving just along here, what I wanted to do was just share a little formula, Scott, if I may. I came up with this formula because so many people are thinking about the vanity metrics of likes and engagements, and they're out of your control. The platforms determine whether your post gets liked or not you. So what I've created is this little formula. It's called the Active Communications Index. Not particularly catchy. If anyone's got a better name, I'm more than happy to take it. But it's called the ACI. And what it does, Scott, is it gets you to think about content times channels times frequency. Okay, so it's content, what you're producing, times the channels, which is where you're sending it, and the frequency, which is, when and how often you're sending it. And if you just times content times channels times frequency, it'll give you a number. Okay. Now, for example, one piece of content times, one channel sent once, just gives you what 1 times 1 times 1. What's that? 3? Or is that 1?
What's 1? If you're doing multiplication, it's 1. If you're doing addition, it'd be 3.
So it's just 1, right? But now if I have one piece of content on 2 channels times 3 times once, what is that? That gives me 2, right?
Right.
So, but then if I then do one piece of content on 2 channels and I do that twice, in other words, I repeat that piece of content, right? I'm going to get 4, right? In other words, I go from 2 to 4. I've got the same piece of content, the same channels, but I've used it twice. So I double my ACI. Okay. Now, the point about the ACI is that there's not a right or wrong, but what will happen is if you use the ACI daily and you keep a track of this, as I do with my team, is you will get an ACI that's right for you. So for example, for me, my active communications index is about 110 to 130 every week. Okay. Because I'm sending out content across certain channels. And what I want to know is, am I keeping consistent? When I was doing a lot of content on a lot of channels, my ACI one week was 200 and the next it was 60 and then it was 45. And right. So what was happening is I was delivering content across these different channels in an inconsistent way. So if someone was looking at that, they wouldn't really know, what was going on in my head. So what we really want to do is if we use this content times channels times frequency formula, you want to keep that consistent every day and every week. And that will give you a formula.
The only thing about the score is that it doesn't include the quality, right? You're just talking about, so you have to figure out a quality number 2, I would think, right?
Okay, because two things about that is quality is, as you said earlier on, a little bit subjective. The measure for quality can be engagement, for example, or reshares. Right?
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
because
that's a metric you have to get like after the fact, kind of.
Exactly. So the whole point of the ACI, Scott, is that a bit like going to the gym, you don't know how fit you're going to get, right? Actually, you don't know your aerobic quality performance. You can't, but that's going to be an outcome of how much you work out and how frequently you work out, right? So what I'm trying to do is to suggest that people start to measure the input because that's within your control. Whereas the likes and the engagements actually are not under your control because the algorithms do that for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. So this idea really coming to this, mindful of the time here, that I came up with this little 2x2, Scott, as sort of a nearly towards the end here, that, I asked people what kind of communicator they want to be, right? And what I've done is I've said there are consistent communicators and there are people that are inauthentic communicators. Okay. Now, what I've done is I've got a 2x2, right? And what I said is that people that are inauthentic and inconsistent, they're kind of illusionists, right? They make things up and they pop up every now and again. You can't be trusted if you're like that. Now, you might be inauthentic, but consistently, right? We know people that consistently don't really tell the truth. Sainsbury's are consistently putting out this message about being sustainable, but actually, it's not true when I go there. So they're what I would call a deceptor. Now, someone who's an entrepreneur that's inconsistent but authentic, and that may, Scott, you may fall into that, where you're creating well-meaning content, but not consistently. I'm saying that might be what called an evocateur, right? You're evoking good emotions in your audience. But what we really want to do is to move you to being a truth sayer, someone who's authentic and consistent, someone that has got their brand story nailed and is out there adding value by offering information that's, informing people, educating people, inspiring people, that comes from your heart and from your purpose. Okay. So consistent, authentic information is really the key. Now, the final thing here to say is that one last statistic, Scott, is that 90% of customers expect a response now within 10 minutes. Hard to believe, isn't it? Right. But according to HubSpot, 90% of customers expect a response within 10 minutes. So you might do all of those great things and not have a mechanism to respond to customers. So one of the key opportunities for people to drive sales through PR is to look at how they handle customers online and through chat when they're actually want to talk to you about the product or service. Everyone's so bothered. For example, you talk about posting 4 times a day on TikTok, but you might have a customer who's got a question that they need to ask you, and you have no mechanism for doing that. And there are tools like Zendesk, for example. Zoho's got a chat you can plug in, have a 1-800 number on your website, have a WhatsApp QRC on your website. Closing the loop, Scott, is absolutely essential for entrepreneurs to demonstrate that they're authentic in their desire to serve their customers. And if you can do these things together, then you have addressed the holy trinity of PR, and you will increase your sales.
No, that's great information. Yeah, definitely got to work on some of those things. So let's get towards wrapping up.
Yep.
I've got last 2 questions. So you gave us a lot of good information, but what's your number one tip?
Number one tip would be to make yourself available. So wherever you can, have your phone number available. If you do nothing else, have a website and have your phone number available, because what people really want to do is they want to know that they can call the person they're going to buy something from, because that's going to be the ultimate test of being authentic about your commitment to serve. So make yourself accessible. Phone number, email address, online chat would be my number one tip.
Yeah, that's great. I do that all the time. Every time I write a post or whatever, I always put my contact info in there, because, the last thing you want is someone to go read all that and be like, oh, I want to talk to this guy more. And then they have to do work to find you. I mean, I'm willing to do that, but most people are not willing to do any extra effort to, if they have to go click a bunch of links to get to your website to find your number, they're just going to move on to something else.
Well, and the problem is, Scott, that there'll be somebody else, there'll be another company who's doing a post, who's available, right? Choice is infinite now with the internet. So if you don't make yourself accessible at that moment when someone wants to find you, there'll be someone else who will.
Yep, exactly. All right, and last question: if people want to get in contact with you, which I'm sure they will after listening to this, you want to leave your contact information. What's the best method?
That's great, Jake. Just come to my website, jimajames.com. And from there, they can find my podcasts and the books and the masterminds. It's all there. So jimajames.com is the simplest place to find me, Scott.
Perfect. And as always, we'll put all that in the show notes. All right, Jim. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll catch everyone next time on the podcast.
Scott, thank you so much for sharing your audience and your time with me.